Post-traumatic stress. What is post-traumatic stress? What can be classified as post-traumatic stress? Easy to get sidetracked, massive issue. So I'm going to tell you just one story. I'll be keen for your feedback, your thoughts. Horses, by the way, have got to be one of the best things for post-traumatic stress. We better not get into that. We can perhaps make a different video about why that happens. So the story I'm going to tell you about is I was in law enforcement for only a month or two short of 40 years. In that 40-year period, from 1976 to 1983, I was on the fatal accident squad. So all that, it's probably a no-brainer, but pretty much that small squad of blokes, 30, because it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, so you had to have rotating shift. All we did was investigate fatal car accidents, truck accidents, car and train, because what we had to do was to find out who was at fault, without doubt, and then if the driver at fault was still alive, we had to charge them with caused death by negligent driving. So I did that job from 76 to 83, and it was a grim job in those days because the death toll triple, quadruple what it is now. In the 70s, early 80s, drink driving was far more significant. Car safety, road rules, the traffic cameras, radar, all of these things have significantly reduced the road toll in South Australia in particular. So here's my story about doing that, pretty grim. Can you imagine doing that job for all those years? Some of those stories I could tell you. And of course when I went on to that squad I was only 23, 24. What was I thinking? I volunteered. Man, must have been insane. But anyway, we'll move on. So what happens is when you had that job, when you weren't investigating fatal accidents or doing the paperwork, no idea about the amount of paperwork that you had to do. Moving on again. When you weren't doing that job, you had to do proactive policing. We were in highly visible police cars. They were called candy stripes because they had dark metallic blue and ruby red metal flake stripes down them, so that's why they were called candy cars. They really stood out. And we were just supposed to drive around and still get pinches, traffic pinches, like any other traffic cop when we weren't investigating. So there were some lurks and perks, and one of them was that a patrol car has to be in its patrol area. That's why they're called Delta 10, because Delta 10 on a map, so you know in LA, Adam 12 was an area that they covered. They never went out of that area. Different when you're on the crash cars. That was the colloquial name. That was what we called ourselves, the crash cars. But it was different then because you could go anywhere you liked. And so we had some, look it up, in South Australia, Adelaide, we have got some of the world's best beaches. And those beaches are pristine white sand that you can drive on. And so, being a young man in his 20s, careful of what he says now because of who might see this, but we would go driving on those beaches, making sure people weren't driving dangerously on the beaches when there were small children about, and if by chance, perchance, there were young ladies on the beach in skimpy bikinis, that was a bonus. So I was driving this one particular day. I was driving down one of our gorgeous beaches on a gorgeous sunny day. Don't you want to hear this story? Come on in. Hey, come in. You're going to hear the story. So, gorgeous day, beautiful sunny day, fabulous beach, perfect. It's like out of a movie. And as I'm driving down the beach, I see a young woman in a fairly brief bikini, very attractive, coming along the beach towards us, and she sees the police car, police uniform, police car driving down the beach, and as she smiles and she turns and she starts sort of trotting towards the police car with a big smile on her face. Woohoo, you know, here we go. Have a bit of a chat. And as she comes up to the car, and this is where we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress, because I am getting upset. This was more than 40 years ago. 40 years ago. So what happens is this young girl, pretty young girl, is coming up to the passenger's window of the police car, and she gets to within 2 or 3 metres, pretty close, and then I notice that some distance behind her, maybe 30 metres behind her, was a couple, male and female, who are assumed to be husband and wife. And what they had done is they had started veering towards the police car too. And the girl comes up. By this time the girl is at the window and she's bending over and smiling and saying, "Hello, how are you?" And that's when the first thing is, clearly this beautiful young girl is not 100% mentally. And then, good God, the couple walk up and say, "Hello, Steve." And that's when the penny dropped. The other shoe dropped. So pause for a minute while I tell you another story. Have to investigate fatal accidents. That's the job. That's all we did. And there was a road, a major arterial road, multiple lanes, 4 lanes up the hill, 4 lanes down the hill. There was also a cross section. Both very busy roads, so obviously they have traffic lights. The traffic is so heavy that no one would be able to make a right turn. If you're in America or another country that drives on the left-hand side, if you drive on the other side of the road to Australia, then it would be your left-hand turn. But the best way of describing this is a turn to cross that mass of traffic at traffic lights. So there is a green arrow. The lights go red, the traffic stops, green arrows come on, and the cars can turn safely. What had happened was a car was driving up the hill, green arrow, started to turn, semi-trailer, big, heavy, fully laden semi-trailer, coming down the hill, got no brakes, ploughs through a red light and smashes straight into the side of this small car. The small car, you have obviously guessed for yourself, was being driven by the girl in the bikini that had come up to the car. Alongside her was her fiancé, just about to get married. She was driving, she did the right thing, green light, turned, smashed into her, killed her fiancé, seriously injured her, so that when she came out of hospital, she had not back to her full mental capacity. And of course the worst thing is that although, don't know what country you're watching this in, and America would be interesting to know what would happen in America, but the situation is, yes, she had a green light, but if you took away the traffic lights, she should give way to that truck. And so by driving in front of the truck, even though she had a green light and he had a red light, she was still partially to blame. So the truck driver only got charged with some minor offences about the condition of his truck, his brakes failing and driving without due care down the hill, that he was travelling at a speed that he couldn't stop, he's burnt out his brakes. And so this is why I say post-traumatic stress, because now that vision comes to me all the time, because I was really just out, supposed to be working, I was driving on the beach looking at girls, and the shock of it turning out that there's a pretty young girl I'm looking at, and then the parents of that girl say, "Hello, Steve," and one of those situations that comes back to me regularly. So that's it. Going to call it quits there with that post-traumatic stress story. People might think you're a wimp, Steve. That's not post-traumatic stress. That's nothing to be upset about. I'll just leave it with you. And hug this horse. Turn the camera off and have a big hug. Cheers.